Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, salam. Welcome everybody to MACFEST 2026 and to the Festival of Words and Books, one of the 9 mini festivals that MACFEST is hosting every year. And today it's the comedy day with Nabz Pat and Preacher Moss. Nabz Pat is our host for today. You might remember her from our previous events. She's a writer and stand-up comedian who's been featured at the New York Underground Festival, Leicester Comedy Festival, and BBC Asian Network. With over 7.5 million views and over 50,000 followers on TikTok, she was named one of the top 8 creative Muslim women on YouTube back in 2018, alongside Dina Tokyo, Mona Haider, and Tazifi, by the leading digital online magazine The Scout. Previously, Nabz hosted an event with Ola Labib. If you've missed that event, it's recorded on MACFEST YouTube channel. You can find it when you go on to MACFEST homepage and scroll down to the YouTube icon. And today, Nabz Pat is hosting Preacher Moss. Of course, I googled Preacher Moss. The first thing you can see on his website is the 1000 Owners Challenge. So if we have any time for questions or insights at the end, I would love to know more about the 70-day Eat to Eat campaign, please. And if you have any questions, any insights, any thoughts you'd like to share, please put them in the comments, in the chat, or in the Q&A portal. Over to you, Nabz.
Thank you very much, Katarzyna, and welcome everyone. I am Nabz Pat. Assalamu alaikum. Whether you're joining us in the morning, is that right, Preacher Moss? How early is it?
Not bad.
Not
8 in
bad.
the morning? 8 in the morning, 8:07. I'm not complaining.
8:07. You've got your coffee in hand. I've got my cup of tea in hand. Might reflect the differences in our hot beverage preferences here. Anyway, welcome to you all. It is a fantastic session we've got for you for the next hour. We are talking to Preacher Moss. He is someone who spent the past few decades using comedy to challenge stereotypes, build bridges, and make Muslims laugh at ourselves in the most healthiest way possible. He is, of course, someone who I've grown up hearing about, knowing about, thanks to the tour he was part of. 1/3 of the co-creators behind Allah Made Me Funny. That tour has been iconic. It's been a movement in Muslim comedy, and it's had a global platform long before representation for Muslims was ever fashionable. So I would like everyone to welcome Preacher Moss today here at MACFEST. Welcome. How are you doing, Preacher?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody out there. Tuning in for MACFest. Thank you so much for having me on this platform. Very excited to share some insight, share some history. You know, I laugh. I think I am technically the first Muslim comedy scholar.
We like that, and we cannot wait to head into that conversation with you very soon. I know that our tech here at MACFest, Steve, is going to be showcasing some of your comedy.
Steve is the man.
Yes, Steve is the man. We have been working we know Steve has been working very hard up until the last few seconds before we went live in procuring the footage and getting it loaded up. So we will have a real delight for you all as we showcase Preacher Moss in his element, with a bit of jazz, with a bit of rhythm, with a lot. That's all I can say. So we can't wait to see a real showcase of you in performance. But before we get going into the conversation, I also want to welcome everyone who's tuning in from around the world. We have a chat messenger group. I've already opened it and it's already underway, and lots of people are messaging on there already. So please do get your questions ready for Preacher Moss, because towards the end of this discussion, I would love to have this session be as interactive as possible. So we'd love to hear from you. Whatever your burning question is, please get it into the chat and I will read it for you. And wherever you're tuning in from, you are most welcome today. So, Preacher Moss, without further ado,
Yes.
I would love to head straight into your origin story. You grew up in America before Muslim comedy was really visible. Where did you get your humor from? Because you grew up with lots of different communities around you.
Yes. Well, I was born in Washington, D.C., so almost by default, that makes part of my comedy political. Um, this the politics of how Washington, D.C. came into fruition, how we had uh, predominantly black population but no black mayor. You have all of these things, and they build your character. I don't know if people really understand how much it really builds your character. We say we might have black. We didn't have Muslim comedians back in the day, but you know we had Muslim jazz musicians, and Muslim jazz musicians were hilarious. Jazz musicians, in their own way, are very humorous, very cynical. But what I like is you can take all of that to the side. You know, it's all about your craft and your art. So I grew up around jazz musicians, more so than comedians. So my story is I did not want to be a comedian. I wanted to be a jazz musician. My dad, God bless his soul, my best instrument was the violin. I was a really good violin player. My dad, you know, in the 70s, black man, my dad was like, "You are not playing the violin." You know, he's like, "You can get beat up a lot, son." So, so yeah, comedy
Just
was
hit
a
them right
default.
back with that violin, I say.
Yeah, well, you know what, you know what's funny? Everywhere I went, I was too young. I missed the cutoff, so I was always too young to do something. So even when I went to college, I missed the cutoff for the legal drinking age. So I was 17 in college and uh, couldn't do the comedy clubs. So my fallback was the jazz clubs would let me come do stand up on the breaks, on the band breaks. And alhamdulillah, I got a little bit more proficient, got better, and then they would let me open shows.
Alhamdulillah. So your foray into comedy essentially was rhythm.
Well, I mean, while we're being honest, you know, jazz is a cheat code for me. So when I'm on stage, people think, "Oh, he's doing jokes." Actually, I'm doing music.
You're doing music.
I
Oh,
hear rhythms. I hear staccato. I hear slurring. I hear presentation. I hear tone. Um, at one point when I was younger, I literally would write comedy to jazz solos. Sort of like the old vocalese music, you know, like the Frank Sinatra and a guy named Eddie Jefferson. He had a song, Moody's Move for Love. There I go, there I go, there I go. And I used to write like that tight to the rhythm. And
mhm.
so, yeah, as you get better, you get older, it's like you let go of that and you kind of frame it um, in your own style, if you will, your own mythology, presentation. So yeah, and plus I was a school teacher. So my specialty was you got to get the attention quickly. So
Interesting.
I
So
taught
it's
severely. I taught
all the
severely emotionally
elements.
disturbed kids. I taught severely emotionally disturbed children. If you didn't have their attention in the first what minute 45 seconds minute of class, it you might have a very long day.
So all these ingredients essentially helped you shape your entry into comedy. And so
And
when
plus, I was a social guy. Um, you know, I was just talking about this with another comedian. In college, I said I was 17. I was in college, but I wound up being the the protest comedian. So they would have protests, and I would go up ahead of the speakers and do material. And they let me do material because we were protesting apartheid back then. The brutal treatment of Black South Africans in South Africa, Johannesburg, Pretoria, stuff like that. And apartheid was real because back then you didn't have 24-hour TV. The world wasn't a global economy at that point in time. Television went off at 1:30 here in the United States. Um, so you get bits and pieces about international news. Uh, we had the blessing of a Malcolm X. May Allah be pleased with him, who introduced us to Pan-Africanism that tied us not just to um, Islam as Muslims, but also understanding the struggle across the board and colonialism and things like that. And by the time I was in college, I'm reading Franz Fanon, Wretched Are the Earth. So my mind is not, when you get on stage, you have so many things that are permeating your thoughts other than set up punchline, set up punchline, set up punchline.
That's interesting. So we've launched right into the segment about craft here and
Yes.
comedy creation style. Would you say for your own experience with comedy, it's mostly instinct versus like a traditional structure and routine to comedy?
It is about craft. It is about getting shots up in the gym, repetition. Um, it is about taking your lumps, taking something that's not funny and figure out the funny in it, because the funny may be in it, but the problem may be you and how you present it, or how you craft it when you put it out on stage. Um, I found, I always had to write out my material, and I would let somebody read it because they are reading it the way they hear it. Not, if I just say it, they're hearing it the way. I was like, oh, and like that's what you would write down stuff. It's like, the nuances. The economy of words is very, very important. I get frustrated. I watch a comedian sometimes or a speaker just dance around like, man, will you get to the get? Will you get to what you need to get to? And if it's not there, then just move on to the next thing. Don't, time is valuable. And when I'm in front of audiences, I'm like, time is valuable. If I have 60 minutes to do, I'm going to give you 60 minutes of real material. And it'll, if they're laughing, now you're going to go over, but you learn. But it is about the craft and
Well,
respecting.
what is your learning process then, Preacher Moss? Because it's not smooth sailing when you're performing. It
I
takes a
learned
lot
how
of
to.
practice, and so you put out jokes. Sometimes you win the audience, sometimes you lose the audience. You probably had, times where you've bombed. How do you survive that experience?
Well, I learned how to write stand-up comedy watching jazz musicians write music. So I understand that this part right here, I may not have you, but it's okay because that's part of the plan, right? I may not have you here like a killer joke. I don't need a killer joke. I need to build this thing. I need to take you on a journey. I need to give you some tonality. And, the greatest compliment when you're a comedian is making people miss. We thought you were going this way, you went that way. The best compliment is I didn't see that coming. And that procures this idea about your craft. Like when you listen to jazz, sometimes you'll listen musically and you'll go with the musician. Go, man, where is he going with this? How are you going to put me on a soft landing? And I used to think that way when I did stand up. The art of the callback is not the art of the callback. The art of the callback is that you take ownership in something that I've said and it resonates with you. I have a joke. It's a classic joke. It's called "Do Not Wear Your Shoes in the Voodoo Area," and that joke, people will bring their kids back. Like, we already saw your show, but my kids, they want to see it live. They want to see you do not wear your shoes in the woo area. Oh, you didn't do, can you do it? They requested like you're a band, like you're a band. Can you do that for us? We're here. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's funny. But I think the thing is also from a musical tradition and an oral tradition, I look at comedy as transformational. So coming up from the plantations, coming up from the islands, um, having a sense of humor was a life skill.
Indeed. So hold that
Yeah.
thought about transformational, because you've been on a journey that has transformed the landscape of comedy, especially for Muslim comedy. So I mentioned earlier something that I grew up hearing about when I was younger was the tour Allah Made Me Funny. Now you started this in 2004,
Yes.
at a time not so far away from, a time when Muslims were beginning to be really politicized. A very difficult time indeed in the West for Muslim
Well,
identity.
well, technically, it started like 2002, but it was a solo thing. I was doing it by myself.
So what made
And
you
one of my
advocate?
teachers, is his name is Imam Wartadi Muhammad. May Allah be pleased with him. You start looking around and you're like, okay, if I keep it just with me, then I've created this unnecessary comedic passivity. I can
Mhm.
just go over here, go over here. And then the comedy is not challenging. So bringing on other people, I brought in Ashar Zaman, I brought in Azim Muhammad from he was in the Nation of Islam.
Mhm.
Was like we're going to present the face or the history of Islam in America in this comedy show. We're
Yeah.
going to do that, and then it becomes a much more broad presentation. So
Yeah.
you can't hate on one thing, you can't hate on another thing, and then it becomes even more strategic. Even with the name Allah Made Me Funny, my partner was like, "Hey man, we should call it God Made Me Funny." Now I had a problem with that because I converted to Islam. I'm like, well, if I just wanted to say God, I'd have still been Christian. I like saying Allah because it makes a lot of coworkers nervous when I say Allah. But I'm like, no, man. This is the original language. This language was taken from my people, and now we're rediscovering it through Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Noble Drew Ali, the Ahmadiyya movement. We're discovering this language. I'm not going to just throw it back. And so the strategy or the thought process between Allah Made Me Funny was, even if you hate Muslims, even if you hate the Torah, you still got to say Allah's name.
Indeed, and wise choice. Not merely from the
I hate
blessing
Allah Made
point
Me
of view.
Funny. Yeah, but you still had to say his name.
Yeah.
You're going
No,
to recognize one way or the other.
it was a wise strategy, and not least from a PR perspective as well, because it's a niche tour, but it had global appeal. So
And we have to be careful with niche because people will say it's a niche, and people say that. I'm like, yeah, 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. There's nothing niche about that.
true.
There's a problem if you play yourself small. In
Mhm.
America, there's two problems if you play yourself small. One, people will keep you small, and two, people will pay you to keep yourself small. So the branding of Allah Made Me Funny and things like that, you know, everybody wants to say in some way that I have something to do about it. You know, it was always fun to say, Allah's the best of planners. Leave it at that, right? Um, and I always, I always worried about people trying to corporatize this name. Like you can't corporatize it. Like you can't trademark Allah's name. You know what I mean? It doesn't work. The thing is, people don't understand, and we just had a terrible incident here in the United States. We had Three Muslim brothers were murdered at a masjid
Right.
down in San Diego. And the community is like, this is Islamophobia, Islamophobia. I'm like, but you have to have a historical connotation. There are slaves who came to the United States who were Muslim, right? Legally, they had no recourse. Islam was ripped from them. Islam was taken from them. Their language was taken from them. Their religion was taken from them. The religion had to go underground for 100 years before it could reappear and people could connect with it, which is a miracle in and of itself. And I don't mean just African Americans. I mean African Americans, Latinos, Caucasians. You know, you have people who were born in Muslim countries reconnecting with Islam. I'm like, this is a powerful thing, and I'm like, you know, that is the real challenge. You know, speaking on it, those people didn't have a chance to speak on it. We are the product of that, and it's like, stop giving back. You know, I want to say capital to the people who they don't understand you. Stand firm in what you believe. Muslim comedy for me was that 2004, and we set the we set to be disruptive. We went to places they didn't expect Muslims to show up. We went to places where we said, hey, listen, we have buying power, we have economic power. So in your club, we're telling you you're not going to serve alcohol. We're telling you you're not going to serve pork. You're going to shut all that down. Why? Because we got money too. We'll take it out of the way. And then the last part was, can Muslims be funny? I'm like, we've been hilarious for years. We just bought it to your chest. You know, we just bought it to your chest. It was almost like the old Negro baseball league. It's like, can black guys play baseball? Absolutely. It's just that we bought it to the major league baseball, and now you really being able to see what talent is.
You know, there's a real responsibility you take on your shoulders when you put it that way. Did you find that the comedy at that point was difficult or just necessary?
Well, on the outside, Nabs, people would say, "Hey, this is Muslim comedians trying to talk about the Muslim image in a positive way to establishment, or here in the United States, white supremacist establishment."
Mhm.
But it was a facade. You know, Imam Muhammad said, "Go to your people that you
Mhm.
don't know." So as
Mhm.
African American, I needed to go to my immigrant brothers and sisters, because the fact was, in 9/11, it's like, if the powers that be knew that we weren't connected, that we weren't united, we were just sitting ducks. We get picked off right away.
Mhm.
And in those years, it's evolved into something like this. We're doing MACFEST
Yeah.
in 2026. There was no MACFEST in 2004. You know, in 2015, it's like, these things find their way. All praises due to Allah. All these things find their way, and it's like, if we're clear about the intention of things, and I would say that about Muslim comedy. When we first started, we were very, very intentional
Yeah.
about where we performed, how we carried ourselves. Extremely intentional and bold that way.
Well, it did achieve that success because you and the tour became household names. As I say, I keep repeating this, but I've grown up with your name in my household. Um, do you feel like the tour achieved its goals or didn't?
I think one of the goals that is overlooked is, it was so great and gratifying to be able to bring the Muslim community into a space and shine a light on them and say that that's us.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't a
There was a
masjid.
bold confidence.
It was like those people, they bought tickets, they came on time, which is not anything. It's like, but they believe in a product that looks like them. They believe in a product that it's a strong dynamic that we're proud of each other. To put Muslims in a space or African Americans in a space where they're not having to validate for other people, we're self-validated and we're self-credentialed. We're in effect we're self-actualized, and being able to go out and do that was a huge thing. And it did go against, it went against what was going on in 2004, 2003, which was we were supposed to take it. So all that made me funny was a protest tour that nobody saw coming.
No, through
And
laughter.
I had a lot of, I had a lot of training. Like I said, I was 1984. I'm on stage protesting apartheid, doing jokes about apartheid down in South Africa because that racism was real. And we had racism because of the United States, but I'm like, that racism is real. They're locking people. They're making people. Uh, you know, they're making people walk on the other side of the street. They're making people live in certain areas of town. I'm like, they're the majority, but it's a minority it's a very corrupt, dominant minority that's telling them they could do. And I'm like, hey man, we've been here before. Like that's that's what we came from, and that's what we don't want to be. So yeah, and after 4 years of doing that, to being the opening comedian to actually leading protests, organizing protests, that that it gave me a sense of community. And
It's
it
really
also helped me. It did lead me to Islam too, but it gave me a very, very strong sense of community.
So let's touch on that in a bit. But what I'm really struck by when I hear you talk about, the kind of voice you put out, the movement you created, you have been inspired. And this is the thing, when we're talking before we're broadcasting live. Sometimes
Yes.
the richest conversations take place. So I know that you were mentioning Dick Gregory. I want to hear more about the influences that fueled your comedy journey to what you do today. But it's really interesting for me, someone who's going up into the circuit in the UK as a stand-up comic, and how the culture is so very different. It's essentially, the culture is we just want to make people laugh. And I know that's the starting point everywhere across, that's the unifying force between all of us comics across different countries. But we see in the UK, we don't seem to have this kind of protest movement that, you in America seem to talk so boldly, confidently, and passionately about. And
I mean, but everybody doesn't do it. Everybody's going to have their own cup of tea. And of course, the industry will prefer the people that don't speak out. They would prefer the people that don't cause problems.
yeah, yeah.
Sell your tickets, we'll pay you, go home. I didn't come out of that. I'm a child of the 60s. I was born a year after Malcolm X was murdered. May Allah be pleased with him. And I was 2 when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I know what the Black Panther movement was about. Um, and so you see that. And it burns in your memory, it burns in your spirit. So you have to speak out. So, a Dick Gregory is a guy who that's who you pattern yourself after, because if he can do it, I can do it. If he can do it in the most extreme situations, why can't I do it in a much less extreme situation? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I mean, I still I still do stand up shows at the prisons.
Mm.
I go into prisons and perform, and one of my friends is like, "Do they pay you?" No. It's like that's what you're supposed to do. Your religious orientation. I'm supposed to be here. But even in there, you're talking about real facts. You're talking about, hey man, I'm not saying, hey guys, jump over the wall, but I am saying, hey man, while you have this time here, however much it is, like, what version of yourself, what better version of yourself are you working on? In the words of my good friend Umar Day Hakim, who was a beautiful brother, passed away last year. Whenever he would call you, he asked you two questions. And I use this with my comedy and when I'm writing. What are you doing and what are you working on? What are you doing and what are you working on? And that you acclimate to those kind of things. And comedy becomes a lifestyle. It's a choice lifestyle. But when people come, I I think we can oversimplify it. They come to laugh. No, there's a lot of pain in that audience.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who are not sure about who they are, what they want to be, even if they want to be here. And I've run across that. My 90s years as a 90s, 80s, and 90s road comic, solidified that. Going to the places in America you don't see, and meeting people in uncomfortable spaces sometimes. Comedy now is different because you can get on social media, you know you can frame your own audience through technology. Um, when I came up, there was barely videotapes. There was barely VHS, and because this wasn't a global economy, you get a videotape of yourself, and you go down to the local club and you give it to them. You hope that they hired you for an opener, and you work as an opener. And you work your way up from opener to middle to headliner. And once you were good in your local area, then you went regionally. So within the state, and you would do that, and then it was like that. And
Well,
there's some aspects that I really like about the UK club scene, because to me it's still very pubby.
it is. It is. But let's you've been an opener to others. Let's see how a jazz band is an opener to you. Let's see a clip of you in action.
It's the best
Steve,
walkout for a comedy special ever. All right.
hit it, Steve.
I can't hate on them. A lot of Muslims, they do take shots at Trump, and I am one of them. But he's made me a better Muslim in a lot of regards. He's made me a better Muslim. Let me tell you how. In previous years, when the Preacher Moss would get upset or frustrated, this is family, I'm going to tell you, I would use profanity to express myself. I'm not alone. But with Trump, I no longer use profanity. In fact, I replaced all my bad words with the word Trump. I lost my keys. I was like, oh, Trump. I hit my foot on the bed. Bam! I was like, ooh, Trump. Boy, I lost $100. I yelled out, Eric! That's the son of a Trump.
Preacher Moss, joy is still allowed. That is a clip from your recent tour.
Yes. We're giving a gear up for the fall, but we had a great run in April. Man, I needed that tour. I needed to walk into a spot and see people. Earn. It's almost telling people, I know you've seen me before, but forget all of that. I really want to earn. I want to earn your laughter. I want to earn your respect. Like I want you to make it hard for me. Don't give it to me. Let me earn it. And in some regards, if you're not going to give it to me, I'm going to take it.
This is the life of a comedian. You're forever giving yourself the challenge, never taking the easy path out.
Yeah, I mean, because this easy path they call agents and managers. No, I'm just kidding. You know what it is? It's the craft. It's you hear the jazz in the back. That means something. You can never get just comfortable with your jazz band because you're going to be looking for different sounds. People in your band are gonna be looking for different sounds. All that made me funny was almost a cross between like a jazz band and Wu-Tang Clan. Yeah, we all had different vibes, different flavors. Um, Guys developed their own identities. Uh, some meshed, some didn't mesh, and that's quite okay. That's all right. I remember taking I took Guz Khan out on his first like tour.
Really?
Yeah, I took him out on his first tour, and the name of that tour was Public Convert Number One,
Uh-huh.
and he was the opener. And just talking to him about the business,
How
talking
did
to
you
him.
come across Gus Khan? I want to know insider info.
There's a brother named Rehan Iqbal. I think it was out of Birmingham, I believe, and he wanted to do a tour. I pitched him a tour, and we did I think 6 cities or something like that. Might be a few 6 cities, and they were all small venues, classrooms, things like that, which I'm fine with. Like I said, this takes me back to my road comic days. And he said we got an opener, and it's like it was Guz Khan. It was before he blew up. He had done something about a pachysaurus, some joke about a pachysaurus or something like that. And he was still teaching then. And this is right before he got on, I think, BBC Radio One or something like that. So they were looking at him, but it was just meeting up, talking about the business. Um, and I love Gus. That's my guy. But it was just talking about the business. And I took him on his next tour. I took him on actually his first 2 tours. And having him understand this is the business and getting a little bit of um, some background information about how we did comedy. So a lot of times when I see him on Instagram standing up for social causes and things like that, I'm like, that's my guy. You know, um,
Mhm.
there's always love and respect there, but it's like he embodies a lot of okay, yeah, I do the movies, I do Mobeen and things like that, but in my soul, these things really, really matter. You know.
So, I just want to give a shout out to all of you who are tuning in from around the world today. We've had a greeting from Ewan. Assalamu alaikum from Jakarta. He says, so wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. I'm coming to
If
Jakarta soon, inshallah.
Amazing, amazing. We are truly global this afternoon here at MACFEST. So if you are tuning in from anywhere around the world, please hit the chat button and let us know where you're coming from, where you're tuning in from. Preacher Moss, we have some questions that have been flooding into the chat. So I'm going to
Cool, absolutely.
start the Q&A from the audience in a couple of minutes, but just before then, I want to continue a few questions around your craft. I want to know how a joke begins for you. Is it an emotion? Is it an observation? What's your starting point?
Irony. Irony. So for
Irony.
me, so for me in the United States, the biggest irony was as an African American and a Muslim, the biggest irony was racism. And
It is ironic.
why was it irony? It was like because you keep telling me about democracy, and you have your historical narrative tells me that you don't really believe in democracy.
Yeah.
So there are people who live on that line like there's nothing wrong. I'm like, oh, there's a lot wrong. There's a lot wrong. And it starts with the irony, and then I think the thing is, as from a teacher space, behavior, looking at behavior, framing how people act. You don't even frame it; they frame it for you. So you take the irony, the behavior, and I'm like, it's just a lot of paradoxes in there, and questions. I used to think you got to answer every question. Sometimes it's funny to ask the funny question and let people fill it in. With my stand up, it would be two things. I could either fill it in, just doing a joke, or I'm gonna go into a whole play out about the scene. We're in the store, we're in the grocery store, we're in the produce section. There's a guy over here, guy over here. I'm gonna play different characters. It's like a band. I'm gonna give you different people, and like talking about my mom and dad, in a conversation. You're doing all three. Richard Pryor used to be able to do. He did those, and he was amazing. Eddie Murphy is the only thing that's come close. Like Eddie Murphy is the clumps is genius because it's all these voices in your head, and when you watch him do stand up, I think we don't really appreciate where he was with Raw and Delirious because he's putting all these pictures out there, and people like him, they speak in pictures, music and things like that. I always thought, and still, well, he is, but he was a musician. When I first saw him, like Eddie Murphy's a musician, because you don't get timing like that. Like, guy behind me, Red Fox here, he had the best timing of any comedian I've ever seen in my life.
I need to take up some musical lessons for sure after having this conversation with you. Last question on craft.
Yes.
How do you ensure that something that you put out that's serious doesn't lose its seriousness in the joke?
But you don't know. You're
You
never
trust
gonna
in
know.
Allah.
Yeah, but it gets to intentionality. There's some people who will look at your joke and it may not come off, but they'll say that person was trying to say X, Y, and Z. And look at your parents. How many times your parents said something and you go, I don't know what mama was talking about, but she meant it.
Mothers are the best comedians, huh?
I've seen people who speak foreign languages and they're talking to me. I have no idea. I'm looking around. I'm like, I don't know what that man said. I said, but he was feeling that. And sometimes you look at him like you have no idea what you're saying. But I got you though. Just the emotion. And the thing about craft, and I say this a lot now, for comedians, it's like you don't own the craft. It's coming through you. The good comedian is almost like a teacher. A teacher has a classroom, not for 5 years. A teacher has a classroom. You're going to teach those students maybe 10 months, and you're going to let them go. And you don't know if what you taught them, they really resonated with, they learned from, things you talked about in terms of life skills, you don't know. But that frames your intentionality. That makes you teach harder. That makes you teach more strategically.
There's probably a follow-up question which nicely moves on from what I just asked. Sephora, I don't know where you're tuning in from. Do let us know in the chat. But she asks, how do we be more intentional with our art? What does he see as the missing link in creatives now? So, you're looking at today's generation, how are you comparing it to your own generation? And how do we bridge the gap?
Got to remove competition. When you're putting out your craft, you got to remove competition.
But isn't competition healthy?
In some regards. We tend to think that. There's nothing wrong if somebody is funnier than you. There's nothing wrong if a musician has more knowledge about an instrument and can play different forms. There's nothing wrong with that. But we get into competition and all of a sudden we take it personal. And taking it personal takes away from your intentionality. If you don't like the fact that you can't play that music, then practice harder.
How much do you practice, by the way?
Well,
so from the inception of a joke to it being performed on stage, what is that journey and how many sessions do you have with that joke?
Well, I don't really write jokes. I write concepts.
So you're an improv artist, essentially?
No. I write concepts.
Concepts.
Yeah, improv is a different thing.
Are you testing it out on the crowd then for the punchline?
Well, sometimes there's no necessarily thing for punchline. Some of it just lays out on its own. Sometimes the punchline is a callback. Sometimes you've explained it so well, you just need to dismount. It's okay. I mean, I work with a jazz band. We did my comedy special. The thing with the jazz band is there's no punchline. When we start, we start. When we finish, we finish. And it's about the journey. How are you taking people on the journey? We talk about craft. If your craft is solid, it's two journeys you're gonna have. One, the audience, and two, your own journey.
Mm.
That's how comedians don't do old material. I'm not doing it. I did that as dated. You could say it's dated or whatever, but it's moved you into a different level of how you perform, right?
Mhm.
Maybe the emotion is not the same. We don't do the energy is not there because we don't feel that way, or we've evolved about a topic. It started here, but now it's much bigger. When I talk about concepts, sometimes I put a question out. What would happen if
Mm.
what would happen if? And you could take news or whatever, and you can start at a point. This is what happened. What happened after that? What if this? What if that? What if this? And then the play out is the audience may never see it, but if you can talk about it in a meaningful way that connects, the audience does feel that. When I talk about spies coming into the masjid, it's a very oh my gosh. But what if everybody knew the guy that came into the masjid was a spy? Well, how does that react? And I play it out because it happened, and I matched it. And I say we had a spy came to the match, and I said it was the worst kept secret during that Juma. Everybody knew we had a spy. Even the old ladies at the beginning, old ladies from the match were like, "Sound like Preacher Moss, we got a spy here today. You be nice to our spy." You know, um, the funny part is we still was supposed to have proper etiquette because they came to the masjid, but they came to spy. No, no, no.
Treat
Allah
them
may
off.
enter, Allah may enter their heart while they here spying. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And then you're laughing. I'm like, because this 80-year-old lady believes that. And then you got to fall back. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I mean, what are some of the projects that you're working on? Like you're talking about concepts. What are some of the things you worked on and said that was great then, but this is what I need to be doing now? In the words of Umar Dea Kim, what are you doing and what are you working on?
So the legacy of Allah Made Me Funny really did put the genre of Muslim comedy on the map. Um, do you sometimes have mixed feelings about the category? Do you think it still has a role today, like it did when you first started, or has it shapeshifted?
I think now, and I can be honest, that all the machinations of streaming and things like that, it's like cable back in the day. It used to be like a couple comedy clubs, and then cable came on and had all these comedy shows on cable. So they needed more comedians. It didn't necessarily follow that you worked yourself up to be a good comedian. They just needed comedians. So the problem with the Muslim space right now is it's just not connected to history.
No.
How we started, what it meant, and as the old heads like myself drift, there's no history. So the Muslim comedians begin to sound like the mainstream comedians.
So you
So
think there's much of a distinction happening?
they're not connected.
No.
I can give you a few who are, the social Nabil Abdul Rashid, um, uh, Guz in some spaces, but it's that, and I can't blame them because you're talking about 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You had a whole generation of kids that have grown up in Islamophobia. It was normal.
Mm.
It was normalized. they weren't there. They don't know what the world looked like before 9/11. And I mean, and sometimes when you bring that space out or you begin to talk about it, it does make people feel uncomfortable because like this is the life we're trying to live now. I got it. I respect it. And I'm not judging, but I'm like, but this is the world. You know what I mean? This is, if you weren't doing comedy or this is the world you have to deal with. So, and sometimes you have to make that point to people.
What
I recently,
advice
I
would
recently,
you
I
give?
recently had to do a showcase
Mm.
with some younger comedians. It was actually doing the Netflix is a joke thing in LA. And I'm like, you may not know who I am, but you're gonna know. And I remember my opening joke was, you may not. I said I was a 9/11 Black Muslim comedian, pre 9/11 Black Muslim comedian. I said, you may not get some of these jokes unless you watched a couple of episodes of Sanford and Son, which is the history.
Yeah.
There's a laugh, but the background is you have these events going on.
So what advice would you give emerging comedians, cropping up here in the UK, in America? What message would you say to them,
I would
to influence their comedy?
outside of right again. It start with their what's your authentic self.
Mhm.
Identify that, and you're gonna be okay. There's gonna be a time. There's gonna be a time where somebody's gonna say, "Hey, man, this is your big break," and they're gonna ask you, "Nabz, da 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 da," and then they're gonna ask you, "Nabz, what's important to you? What's your core values?" And based on your core values, that's going to influence whether they want to work with you or not.
Mhm.
If you have weak core values, they may work with you because they think you're malleable. They can mold you. But sometimes your core values are strong. They're like, we don't really want to work with Nabz. She believes. And then there's some people, the majority of people are going to work with you because you're talented, you're driven, you're putting in work, and those things matter. But this in the power structure, people don't want to deal with that. They want to be able to control what you say, what you do, when you say it, where you say it. Because the further you move up, the more and more you're away from the people that put you there.
Well, I
So the audience,
personally, as someone who is dabbling in comedy at the moment, I want to personally extend my gratitude to you for all the work, for the groundwork that you've put out for many of us who are following in your footsteps. And thank you for really solidifying the category of Muslim comedy, because I do lean towards calling my comedy Muslim comedy, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if those of you hadn't laid the foundations of it. So thank you, Preacher Moss.
now listen, I want to thank all the comedians that are out there living their true authentic selves. Some of us agree, some of us disagree, but the respect is always going to be there. And I want to give a shout out to the UK Muslim comedy audience, which is probably one of the smartest audiences that are out there, number one.
I will not disagree.
Number two is just the fact that they've evolved to the point that they are now impacting what are in mainstream comedy spaces. And some of the comedians are bringing their audience with them. Normally they just pick and choose, but they're bringing them with them, putting up their own shows and things like that, and it's just beautiful to see. And now you see the actors who are out there doing their thing. I mean, it's all connected. It's all connected. It's all strategic and very, very intentional.
Thank you. Katarzyna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nabz, for hosting. Preacher Moss, thank you also. It was such an enlightening, fascinating conversation. Really grateful. Thank you very, very much. The recording will be available on YouTube if you'd like to share it with anybody or watch again later. And before we finish, just two little things. One is that we've got the art competition open. So if you are Muslim artist based in the UK, you can submit your artworks for free through MACFEST website. And the second thing is, as usual, the upcoming events. Tomorrow we've got Cultural Exchange Dialogue, Libraries Without Borders on Zoom, same time. And next weekend, so Saturday, 6th of June, we've got Roots and Reverence poetry from the Punjabi Sufi tradition. And then Sunday, 7th of June, we've got International Youth Speaking Out on Environment. And if you are based in the Northwest, you might want to come to a one-day Apple Orchard retreat in Oldham on Wednesday, 10th of June. And then the signature event celebrating Eid at the Lowry, as every year, is on Saturday, 13th of June at the Lowry in Salford. Thank you again, everyone, for joining today, and see you again soon.
Assalamu alaikum.